Again, I will point out that the Dolphins said that he flew back with the team last night. We will await any further updates from them onto his medical condition. Brooke, as we talked about this in our meeting this morning, you brought up one very interesting point about a new way in which NFL teams are practicing, and maybe that is the beginning of a new chapter in all of this.
Right, that's the Guardian caps, Greeny, and they were used in the preseason. I believe they were used through the second preseason game. Not every position group was required to wear them, but Mike Tomlin with the Steelers was incredibly adamant that all of his guys wear them. He said, I don't care if you feel like you look goofy. This is about your protection. And he said that in a collision between two players, if one is wearing the Guardian cap, it reduces the risk of a concussion by 10%. If both players are wearing it, reduces it by 20%. I know that these are not stylish. I know that it might ruin the aesthetic of a football uniform. This goes beyond an aesthetic. This is about protecting players from concussions in an incredibly violent sport. We're talking about protocols that take place after a concussion has happened. Let's also focus on what we can do to prevent them in the first place, knowing that it is dangerous, they will inevitably happen, but why not take every step to reduce them?
And I'm all for trying to protect the player and try to do as much you can with equipment, but at the end of the day, you have to understand the field that you're playing on as well. This all comes down to money. It's a must. Remove grass and put in field turf. They put turf in so they can put more events in the stadium. What do you do with more events? You make more money. There's more seats in the stands. So if you really cared about the players' health and safety, you would make every single stadium that could possibly be grass. Okay? Indoor stadiums, understandably, it has to be field turf. Field turf knocks out more people than helmet-to-helmet contact, just like Tua. He hit his head on the turf. The turf is the hardest surface. Underneath the turf is basically concrete. And anytime you hit your head on it, it doesn't matter if you had 3 Guardian caps on. Your brain's it's Jell-O in a bowl and you're smacking it on the ground. It's going to move. So to try and help the players, they should try to help the surfaces that they're playing on. So field turf is very hard. If you ask anybody here that's played on it, you're way more sore. I tore my ACL on field turf. I've hit my head on field turf.
Yep.
The surface is a problem as well.
No, and you're absolutely right about this, Nico. It's all being driven by money. And here's the other part that we got to acknowledge. We're talking about games being played on Thursdays. Why? Because there are companies out there that are lining up to throw huge amounts of money to the NFL for the Thursday night package. I don't think that it's a coincidence that the company that was doing the broadcast last night failed to mention during the halftime report the incident that happened with Tua the week prior with the Buffalo Bills. So all of this is being driven by money, and that's why I think there is an inherent conflict of interest when we talk about this joint investigation that's being launched based on the failures of the protocols from week 3, because the NFL is all about protecting its own interests. It's all about making sure that they don't have any potential liability. And that lies the rub when it comes to preventing future incidents like what we saw with Tua over the course of the last 2 games.
And here's my issue with people talk about Guardian caps, right? Even the NFL, we're going to Guardian caps and percentage, all these things. Tua in practice is a quarterback. In games, is a quarterback. Quarterbacks don't get hit in practice, right? So they don't get touched. Yet in the game, quarterbacks get hit. So that hit, he's not like, okay, it protects it. To your point, it protects it by 10% in practice. But when games come, he's not wearing a Guardian cap. When games come, this guy that doesn't get hit in practice is getting hit in an actual game. And so you could talk about all the percentages and the numbers and the Guardian caps and all these things, but when the game actually is played, a guy who doesn't get touched in practice is getting concussions, multiple. And so that's my issue with saying, well, we got this thing to try and curb concussions. It may not work.
Well, the sport is an inherently dangerous one, and that's unavoidable. You can make it as much less dangerous, which I understand is not good English, but I couldn't think of a better way of phrasing it. The more you can mitigate that, the better. Obviously, it doesn't solve all the problems. It goes as far as perhaps they can at this moment in addressing them. Go ahead, Brooke.
I was going to say, what if they wore Guardian caps during a game? Again, it's great for practice, but why not during a game?
Yeah.
You have cleats. They're specialized during warm-ups. You warm up with your cool helmet, and you get the aesthetic of that. You get to have the honor and the tradition of that. When the game comes on, put that Guardian cap on, because even that's some kind of cushion on the turf. You do need a different kind of playing surface, obviously, to protect, but until all of the turf gets ripped up, something like that could help.
There's something I'd like to get mentioned here for sure. I'm sure there are a lot of people tuning into ESPN this morning after seeing or hearing about this last night that may not fully understand the culture of football because you're not accustomed to watching shows like this. So some of them might be wondering, well, why would he go back in the game? He felt hurt. He felt that injury. What is it about the football player and his mentality last night that put him back on the field?
It's ingrained in you to be tough. right? Football is based on toughness. And things have changed. Yes, there's more knowledge now than there was 10 years ago or when I started playing football. There's more knowledge of how dangerous it is. And yes, there's high risk, there's high reward, there is. But at that same point, when you look at a player and the way that they're designed, they've been doing this since they were 10 years old, 12, 13, 14.
Yep.
And you were striving to become a professional. And you were lucky enough to be blessed with a certain set of skills that put you in a position to go to school, to go somewhere where you could never imagine you're going. I'm going to go in the NFL. I'm going to make millions of dollars. I'm going to drive that cool car that I always wanted to have when I was a kid. And when you're in that moment, for myself, when you're a 5th-round draft pick, you get dinged. I'm dinged. I got to go out. Oh, next guy, get in. Take Rob's place. No. I worked so hard to get here. I want to be here. I put everything, my life into this to try and achieve the ultimate goal of being an NFL football player, winning a Super Bowl. And those things are what drive guys. And you're like, listen, I know that this is bad for me. But when you're young, how many people have done things when they're in their 20s that they look back in their 40s and 50s and are like, yo, that wasn't smart of me.
That's exactly the point, Nico. I mean, you're not thinking the way a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old man would think. When you're in your 20s, you're like, I got a finite period of time to maximize my athletic ability and make this money. And that's what I'm going to do. And I don't care what happens to me as long as it provides a vehicle for me to get myself and my family into a better situation. That is the mentality of guys that come into the National Football League, Greeny. And that's why we're all sitting here saying the same things. The fail-safes, the protocols, the infrastructure is in place to protect the players from themselves, because players are not going to make the right decision when it comes to what's in their best interest with their long-term health. And that is the conflict that's going on when it comes to something like concussions, which is not something that's necessarily easily diagnosed. But here's the instance that we're talking about with Tua. There were 2 clear situations where we have an idea of what's going on with the player. And if we have an idea watching it at home, then why aren't the people that are charged with this responsibility in the stadiums, on the sidelines, in the booth, taking precautions that are necessary? Even if it was a back injury in week 3, based on what it looked like and the symptoms that he exhibited, why the hell would you let him go back in that game in the second half? It just doesn't make sense. And now you're dealing with an even uglier scene because the NFL's credibility is undermined when it comes to actually caring about protecting players from brain injury. Greedy, it's not a coincidence that youth participation from 2008 till now is going down, 39% across the country. People are concerned about this issue, and last night did nothing to quell those concerns.
All right, let me leave it there for this moment. We will come back. We have much more coverage of this as we go, including we will show you how the rest of the game played out last night between the Bengals and the Dolphins. We will also have a